I'm really interested in the subject of the extra deference that we give to religious convictions and how this is working out in modern society, because this seems to be a real conundrum that we've got ourselves into and that we're getting ourselves into more and more and more. Recently, the last 10 or 20 years, it seems that a lot of kind of moral proclamations are being made with regard to our human rights and with regard to making sure that those rights are placed across the board. Lots of groups are stepping forwards, demanding their own rights, and as a society we're looking at these things morally and saying, well, yeah, you've got a damn good case here, and we're going to make sure that you're not discriminated against, that we're going to prioritise your rights because we think you have a good case. But this sometimes runs into some murky grounds, doesn't it? And it seems that we don't apply them across the board. If somebody has a cultural case for maintaining the status quo, we tend to give that some credence. We tend to make some allowances for that, though we're not really happy to do so. And in the general, we've not done so, I would suggest. But then you've got the case of religion, which is, I suppose, a cultural aspect in many respects, but it's a very specific cultural aspect because it's one that we seem to give more deference to than any other. We've seen it happen with regard to specifically the Catholic Church, I suppose, more than anything else with regard to abortion and abortion clinics. We've seen cases with regard to homosexuality in religion and tried to strike a balance there. But perhaps the most telling example with regard to the kinds of discussions that we can have and the kind of discussion that I want to have here is this case that's turned up in Germany recently with regard to circumcision, and specifically regard to the Jewish community, because I don't really know where to draw the line here. It seems very, very difficult, almost intractable, the kind of problems that are coming up here. What we're saying is it's wrong to mutilate a child's body, to mutilate a baby boy's body by cutting bits off of it unnecessarily, and that sounds a kind of reasonable principle by which to work to. But what we have here with the Jewish community isn't just a community that's saying, well, this is part of our culture to do this and we ought to have the right to mutilate these baby boys in this kind of way. What we have is a community saying that what we have here is we have made a covenant with God. And as part of that covenant with God, God has commanded us to do this to our baby boys. So this is a very difficult position to be in, isn't it? And it's a difficult position that the Germans have found themselves in. The local authorities there banned in part of Germany this practice from taking place. They've now been overruled and we're back to cutting foreskins off again. But it's a difficult position to be in. When somebody makes that kind of a claim to you, what other argument can you give other than an argument that's effectively dismissing their religious belief? I don't know that there is. And I don't know, do we really want to go down the line where we're totally going to trust somebody's religious belief and say, look, I accept that you believe that God has told you to do this, but that's a load of rubbish, really. That's not true. And because that's not true, we're going to stop you from doing it. Because let's bear this in mind. If God had said that, to the Jewish people, then who are we to argue with them circumcising boys? But if we have to accept that as a legitimate principle, then what about if instead of the covenant involving circumcising boys, it had involved chopping their left arm off or gouging one of their eyes out or something like that? Would we draw the line there and say, well, hang on a minute, now we're going to have to squash your religious conviction. Maybe you think you've got a covenant with God that says you should do this, but we think it's a load of bullshit. Would we go down that line there? Or would we still say, well, no, fair enough, if it's such a fundamental part of your religious belief, we're going to let it go? I'm not really sure where we go on this. It just seems so difficult to square this one. Because I do understand if it's a fundamental part of somebody's religious conviction that it's impossible to tackle it. It's impossible to stop them doing it without making some kind of comment, some kind of judgment on that religious conviction. Not quite the same if it's just a cultural phenomenon, I don't think. But when it's a fundamental aspect of a religion and a relationship with God, I think it's a difficult one. Anyway, I've told you what I think, which is that I haven't got a fucking clue. What I'm interested in is what you think. Where do we move forward in cases such as this?